Welcome to ITNW 2355 30Y1, Server Virtualization. I'll be your instructor for this semester. My name is Andrew Phillips. Many of you already know me from other classes I've taught, like the Servers course, the Linux course, or one of our Cisco courses. For those of you who don't know me, I'd like to introduce myself a little before I introduce the class. I've been with TSTC since 2014. I started as a field tech at our Sweetwater campus, back when TSTC in West Texas was still one school among four in the TSTC college system. Since then, the colleges have united into a single institution. I moved to Fort Bend County in 2016 to be the field tech for our new campus here. And I had the privilege of helping bring the ITC online, and doing so for the Brazos Center and the Lineman Annex. There were a lot of other folks doing that work, but I got to be in on it. Along the line, I had the opportunity to begin teaching as an adjunct instructor, taking some of my experience from years of doing and passing that knowledge on to our student body. And then I got a chance to begin teaching full time, and I think I've been doing that for a couple of years now. Now, before signing on with TSTC about 5 years ago, I spent a number of years in the software business, mostly in software quality assurance, and some time in the user support sector. I've done field technical support, field replacement of parts for Dell and IBM. I've done contract work. I've answered phones at an internet help desk, and so on and so forth. A lot of the technology we use today has grown by leaps and bounds since I began my own career back at the turn of the century, and when I graduated with my BBA in computer science in 2003. I've experienced firsthand many of the concepts and lessons that we'll touch on in this course and through the rest of your course of study at TSTC. Cybersecurity is a broad discipline with many possible careers and career fields within that scope. So I'd advise you not to pigeonhole yourself, and if I may be allowed to mix the metaphor, as you chart your course, don't set it too firmly, don't pigeonhole yourself, because you may find many different ways to use this skill set. In my opinion, everyone involved in IT, from C-level executives down to the least and lowest entry-level employee, even temps and contract. Everyone needs to know what you'll learn, because it's an arms race, really. We are smack in the middle of a global war over information. That war can literally take the form of geopolitics. Much more often, it takes the form of petty crime, if not organized crime. In this course specifically, we're covering server virtualization. That's a key consideration for modern cybersecurity discipline. It wasn't always so, because the technologies that we'll discuss didn't exist when I started doing this. The cloud was a metaphor for the internet. It still is. But it wasn't a place where you would store your data. It wasn't a place where you could go spin up the extra virtual machines you needed. It wasn't a place to deploy applications. I basically came into this business around the time when the dot-com boom of the late 90s was turning into the dot-com bust of the early 2000s. I studied things like a little bit about web programming, web design, and CGI in college. The things we can do now with a web browser were daydreams, not even daydreams, when I started this business. So a lot has changed, and you can expect a lot more to change as we go. The term, so our machines didn't have the horsepower we have now. Moore's law has really, really helped us, making our processors more powerful, our memory faster, our hard drives have much more capacity than they used to. the terms, even the terminology we use, didn't exist back then. We didn't have the horsepower to run more than one OS on a given system. The assumption was if you have a hard drive, if you have a computer, it has an OS. For every OS, there's a computer, and for every computer, there is one OS and only one. We didn't deal with any of this multiple VMs, or to say nothing of several dozen VMs running at the same time. The term application virtualization, which we'll discuss later in the course, would have been technobabble, or a manager trying to sound smart and not knowing what he's talking about, which I suppose is also technobabble. Anyway, so many of the things we take for granted now, so many of the ways we can now deliver IT services are new and different, with new and different cybersecurity implications. You really need to understand that, because your clients are going to be using these software, these platforms. Your employers are going to be using these platforms. They're going to want you to know how to protect their stuff on the internet. We're going to talk about some of the most common virtualization products. VirtualBox, VMware, Hyper-V, both at the desktop, at the workstation, and in the data center. We'll be using, and we're doing that so that even if you've only used one or two of these products, by getting exposure to all three of them, you'll end up a more well-rounded cybersecurity analyst or technician. You'll know what to do or not to do with these products. We'll also talk about these things in the data center. Of course, Workstation, VirtualBox, Hyper-V, these are workstations. Virtual Machine Manager, vSphere, vCenter, that's a data center virtualization. We'll also talk about virtual desktop infrastructure and virtual computing in the cloud. Really and truly, cloud computing is not possible without virtual computing. Now, all that being said, we're going to use a MindTap course for this, a Cengage course, so that if your computer doesn't have the horsepower to run one or more of these hypervisors on your own, don't worry. If you want to install VirtualBox and VMware and Hyper-V, go for it. You can't hurt yourself by getting more practice. But if you can't do that, all you need to do is get into Cengage MindTap, run their labs, which are, in point of fact, virtualized in the cloud. So you'll be using the concepts that we talk about from day one. So if you can't do that, just do the labs in MindTap. Just remember that that's where your grades are coming from. There's nothing to submit in Moodle, in our LMS, which you should see in front of you right now. Now, if you want to buy the book, you can. You don't have to, because the text is also in MindTap. But the thing to note there is that an online course, once you can't log into MindTap anymore, it's gone. If you can't log into MindTap at all, say you have a right to, your key hasn't expired, but you don't have power, or you don't have an internet connection, and you still want to get the work done, that's where the Dead Tree Edition comes in. So when I say Dead Tree Edition, when I say hard copy, I mean a physical book, because of course it's made out of dead trees. I really like this option. In my opinion, everything that really matters should exist in hard copy. The last thing you should do is trust all your important data to the cloud. If it's really personal data, don't put it in the cloud at all. If it's really important data, maybe put it in the cloud, but definitely have it someplace else, either an offline backup or a hard copy backup. We're going to learn to use these computers, learn to use these technologies, but we should also learn along the way how not to trust them too much. That's why we talk about things like high disaster recovery and high availability. Now, I'm excited, so let's get started.